Thanks, Tom. Thanks very much, everyone. While I'm down as chair of the CCMA, I just want to talk to you this morning about this afternoon, actually about my experience as chief executive of South Dublin County Council and what we're focused on in relation to housing and the housing agenda. So I don't carry a torch for anybody other than South Dublin County Council, and I'll stick to that agenda if you don't mind. I hope that you find that helpful. I'm conscious of the time frame, so I'm going to lash on. The things I want to touch upon in terms of South Dublin. Sorry, I should say, for those of you who know your geography, you know South Dublin's not in South Dublin, it's West Dublin. So as you approach Dublin on the N4, take Lucan on your left, Palmerston on your left, turn right down the M50 heading south. So on your left then you've got the suburbs of Templeogue, Turnior, Loughlin, Firhouse, heading into the city. On the opposite side, on the right hand side, you've got the major western towns of Lucan, Clondalkin, Tala, and the western villages up to the Kildare border, Meath border of Sagard, Newcastle, Rathcoole. So that's South Dublin, 270,000 people, 90,000 homes, 9,000 of them social housing. So just about anything can happen in housing terms, from much sought after 3-bedroom semis in Turnior to less sought after houses and homelessness and social housing, what have you. You'll find it in South Dublin. So maybe what I have to say may have resonance across the broader Dublin area as well. So I want to talk about permitted developments, ready to go in longer term in the South Dublin area, recent planning patterns, the residential density review that we've been undertaking in South Dublin, other issues, and some summary observations at the end. I wasn't here for Brendan McDonagh's presentation, but I came in on the tail end of it, and he probably spoke to you about tiered developments and what's ready to go and not ready to go and likely to go and so on and so forth. We have taken a similar view of things across Dublin, and I can refer briefly to the Dublin stats, but the South Dublin stats are as follows. Permitted and ready to go units, whether they're, and I'll tell you the type in a moment, is 2,128. These figures are about 2 months old but still relevant. Applications in the system 585. Tier 2B, in other words, what we have carefully analysed has been immediately ready to go, or sorry, immediately obvious in terms of permissions that could be granted in the short term, no obvious impediments, and would yield up, housing starts before 2015 if people were of a mind to do it. That's about 6,446. So in total, between permitted, currently in conversation, and what we think is immediately obvious, you could get up to 9,000-ish units immediately. Across Dublin, we've looked at this, and that runs to about 24,000 units. In the longer term, in terms of South Dublin, there's 20,000. There's zoned land for 20,000 units. So that's where we're at. My contention here is that in the short term, it's not planning. It's not permitted developments. In the medium term, we have an issue, and I'll come to that next. That's the permitted housing breakdown in terms of apartments and houses. Houses is blue, apartments is the, I think, maroon colour. Permitted housing in terms of different house types, they're broken down there between 2-bed houses, apartments, 1-bed, 2-bed, 3-bed. So housing typology shouldn't be an issue in terms of across South Dublin. There's a full range of consumer preferences catered for in terms of what's permitted in those 2,000. That's the 2,000, the immediate 2,000. Something's gone wrong here. This is a security alert, is it? Did I say something CIF didn't like? Just the point of this, what I'm getting to is, I'm coming into next, is just looking at what's permitted, looking at the conversation that's taking place nationally about housing supply and demand. And I want to look to the next few slides in relation to where demand is at as viewed to the eyes of South Dublin County Council in terms of, are we having planning conversations? No, we're not. Are we getting planning applications? Not of a volume that you would think would be necessary to respond to the demand conversation, the supply conversation that's taking place. And I hope to get to that next. Just hit the X. Okay, I think we're back online. I'm back online here, but it's not on the big screen. When I spoke to you about the 9,000 units, and where, in terms of saying that there are various typologies, and there should be enough there to satisfy consumer demand, that's the locations across South Dublin. So everywhere from the inner city suburbs, say of Turnior, Rathfarnham, Knockline, across to the western villages, and in the south middle you have Tala, and up in the north you've got Lucan and Clondalkin. So quite a good spread across the entire county in terms of permitted developments and different types of houses. What I was speaking to before, while we were offline there, was the issue of planning applications. They're the planning stats from 2008 to 2013. It's a pretty worrying trend when we were talking about demand for housing and there being a supply issue, that your planning applications in 2013 are only at 276 when they were at 746 in 2008. 2014 stats are no better. We've only had 5 planning applications for multiple house developments of 20 or more in South Dublin in 2014. On the commencement notice side, that's more positive. We had 140. We had commencement notices for 140 in 2013, and in 2014 so far it's at about 380. So those planning stats are a worry for the sector, are a worry in terms of the broader conversation. So somebody needs to step into the gap. I mean, if this is a great business to be in right now, people need to start making planning applications. Because while I'm confident about the short-term supply issues in terms of planned, permitted developments, this needs to change if we're to get beyond year 3. If 8,000 is the figure in Dublin and 25,000 is the figure in the country, speaking for Dublin, we will have an issue after year 3. In terms of planning activity, another interesting, and I suppose you can interpret this different ways, but in terms of the 2013 figure, in terms of the total of 1,600 odd permitted units, 1,287 of them, 1,287, were repeat applications, were not new houses. Okay, so there was only 376 of those units permitted were new houses out of a total of 1,600. So people who are in the business, you guys either believe you have enough of stock of permissions, or are waiting to see what's going to happen, or aren't geared up for this. And one of those answers, or each of those answers, gives rise to obvious implications. In South Dublin, over recent times, we've had a very significant overview of density and what that might mean in terms of contemporary thinking relative to thinking 5, 6, 10 years ago, and we have reviewed downwards our density across a whole range of plans, including Ballycullen, Adamstown, and we're currently looking at Clonburris, Fortinstown as well as earlier. What we've happened upon in terms of our conclusions, that when density reaches 50 plus per hectare, you're into substantial costs. The mix is dependent on even greater number of apartments, which gives rise to either visually dominant surface car parking or costly underground car parking. Obviously, higher densities gives rise to higher build costs. Higher densities leads to increased costs in terms of common areas, lifts, etc. So the conclusion we've come to in South Dublin, for better or for worse, is that the optimum number is in or about 45 per hectare. That's our thinking right now, and others may agree or disagree with that. In terms of other issues, in terms of development levies, we've reviewed our development levies downward by 26%. I know it's a burning issue in terms of construction industry conversation. That's where we're at in South Dublin. Social housing issues, we have significant numbers on our social housing list. We have planning permission gone through the system for about 300, waiting for a nod, waiting for funding. We're interested in conversations with the private sector in terms of partnering with the private sector, looking at social housing solutions. We're not sure where that conversation is going to go, quite frankly. You'd have to come to a fairly logical conclusion that if the appetite isn't there for private housing, can the appetite be there for public-private collaborations in the provision of social housing? I have my doubts, but I'm always open to that conversation. We're reviewing our county development plan. There are a number of interesting issues that conversations we're having internally from the point of view of what you people are into. You'd have to ask yourself, where is housing norms going in terms of the 80-20 split between homeowners and those who rent? And if house prices are going to remain high, stubbornly high, people saying prices are not high enough at the moment, and incomes are going to be sort of bouncing along the bottom, you'd have to logically come to a conclusion that rental property is going to be the way to go in terms of large managed rental property type of developments, because more and more people are going to rent rather than buy. That would appear to be one, I would think, prevailing influence on planning and permitted developments in the short term. A second one we're trying to address, particularly in the Dublin area, is the amount of people who are living in accommodation that exceeds their current requirements. And would we believe move to smaller requirements in terms of muse developments, properties at the end of the garden, development of brownfield sites. So people who are retired living in 3, 4, 5 bedroom houses but won't move because they can't get something suitable in their locality. And that's something that developers, builders need to look at in terms of an opportunity in the short to medium term. Stability of supply and consumer confidence and visibility of supply. That's something that we're looking at ourselves in terms of being able to say to people, here's what we think is going to happen over the next 5 years, because the people who feel that they're pressurised into buying are not making conscious decisions based on information that looks forward over the next 5 years. I think that's something that the CIF and local authorities and government can do better in terms of providing people with visibility of supply and with security of supply, and allowing people to understand better why you would rush out to buy a house in Swords when there's something available perhaps next year 500 yards away, or whatever the story is. So in summary, and these are sort of the conversations that we're having internally, and so the things we're hearing, the things you're reading in the media, and they're perhaps no different, and perhaps I'm not offering anything new, but they're the ones that are most commonly coming to the surface. Planning applications are not reflected in the demand messages. There is a short-term price premium, but it's localised. In terms of anecdotal observations, you'd have to, I think, consider the whole issue of appetite and capacity, mobilisation costs, people getting back into construction. The 40% equity gap is a real issue. That's what we're hearing. Capacity in terms of builders and trades. Are there new builders? Are people who have been in the building business gone out of it? Have they an appetite to get back into it? Where are the trades? It won't be a question of simply ringing Canada and everyone will come home. It's not that simple. Price needs to increase to cover costs. I know that's a view strongly held by CIF. I know you heard Brendan McDonough say that the interaction between price and supply and demand, that the curves have crossed over. The absence of a homogenous market, it is clearly not a homogenous market, even within and across Dublin. What will government do in 2015? I think that decisions made on October the 14th hopefully will bring some clarity in terms of people's thinking. NAMA is on the move, and that's likely to influence people like yourselves. There's a significant, I suppose, question mark around their capacity. They've given their numbers as 4,000 in the short term, and how will that affect supply and demand and price, their considerations, and will overseas purchasers sit on property? There's a fair degree of casual observation out there about overseas investors buying large tracts of land, and will they be allowed to sit on it, and how will that impact on the market? So they're, in summary, the observations that I would make personally, and that would be made by, I suppose, people across Dublin, and what we're hearing through our planning offices. And that's it, Tom. Thank you.